Finally, Boris Johnson's solution for social care. 2 years after he promised one, today he announced his plan, a tax rise, raising billions.
Yes, I accept that this breaks a manifesto commitment, which is not something I do lightly, but a global pandemic was in no one's manifesto, Mr. Speaker.
Also ahead, more migrants crossing the English Channel after near record numbers made the treacherous journey yesterday. Should the UK build a new coal mine when it's trying to help the world go green? A public inquiry has begun. And into her first Grand Slam quarter-final, we look at the rise of Raducanu.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. The Prime Minister has confirmed his solution to try to fix the crisis in social care in England. It's a big gamble for Boris Johnson, who has broken one promise in order to keep another. Taxes are going up to pay for care in the future and deal with the COVID backlog in the NHS right now. From next April, national insurance contributions will rise by 1.25%. But from 2023, no one will have to pay more than £86,000 for care costs in their lifetime. Our political reporter Shihab Khan has the details.
It's not the usual table that these three sit around together. The Prime Minister, flanked by the Chancellor and the Health Secretary this morning, whilst visiting this care home in East London. Today they're outlining the plans they've drawn up to address the issues in the social care sector, something they've pledged to do for some time.
It's a good idea to do all this, isn't it?
That's the reaction they'll be hoping for. And it was in the House of Commons where Boris Johnson revealed the full details of the plan.
Too often, people were in hospital beds because they or their relatives were worried about the cost of care in a residential home. And that same fear kept many others at home without any care at all. Governments have ducked this problem for decades. There can be no more dither and delay.
The plans will be funded by a 1.25% increase in both national insurance and dividend tax, which should raise about £36 billion over 3 years. But what will people pay towards their care? Those with assets under £20,000 won't pay towards the costs of their care at all. Those worth £20,000 to £100,000 will pay a proportion of the costs. And those with assets worth over £100,000 will pay for their care in full, up to a limit of £86,000. This won't come into force for a couple of years, but the increase in national insurance to pay for the government's plans breaks a key manifesto pledge made by the Prime Minister in 2019. The Labour leader also says the proposals won't address key issues.
Is that under the Prime Minister's plans, the quality of care received will not improve. There's no plan for that. People will still go without the care that they need. There's no plan for that. Unpaid family carers will still be pushed to breaking point. There's no plan for that. This is a tax rise that breaks a promise that the Prime Minister made at the last election. The Tories can never again claim to be the party of low tax.
Catherine Pope's parents both got dementia. She had to sell their home to pay for their care. It was costing around £9,000 a month, and she says she was worried about what would happen when she could no longer afford the payments.
And when the money runs out, you are forced back onto a broken social care system. There's no money in the care system. The councils haven't got any money to do it. They pay lousy wages. They get poor quality, dangerous care at times. And it's a really scary world out there. It's very, very scary trying to make those decisions and do the right thing by your parents.
The issues in the social care sector have been ongoing for years, and the Prime Minister will hope his plans can help address at least some of the problems. Shihab Khan, ITV News, Westminster.
We can speak now to our political correspondent Carl Dillon, who joins us from Downing Street. This is potentially one of the defining policies of this government, Carl.
Yeah, this is absolutely massive, and it will determine perhaps whether Boris Johnson is remembered as a Prime Minister who broke a major promise or a Prime Minister who fixed a major problem. He's doing both, of course. Now, today, our political editor, Robert Peston, argued that actually breaking a promise might not hurt him that much because he's not thought of as by many people as someone who keeps his promises. And I think what might be more difficult on this for Boris Johnson in the long run is the way that he's funding it, using national insurance to pay for all of this extra spending on health and social care. And the problem is that that is going to be raised at a flat rate. Therefore, that will disproportionately affect younger workers. Now, the government is doing a couple of things to try and alleviate that. It is going to eventually charge workers at pensionable age this money, and also it is going to raise dividend tax, which more wealthy people tend to pay. But in the long run, most of the money will be raised by the national insurance rise. And I think that could turn out to be the bigger problem for the Prime Minister, and will affect, most likely, the outcome of the next election.
Dillon, thank you very much. Thank you. So what difference could the extra money raised make? I'm joined by Anne-Marie Perry, who is the Managing Director of an agency that provides carers across the UK. Thank you for joining us. Anne-Marie, Boris Johnson promised a solution to social care when he became Prime Minister in July 2019. We have now got it. What is your reaction?
Well, having more money is fantastic. It's got to be there, but the crisis is bigger than that. We've got an increasing ageing population and a decreasing younger population, which means our workforce is actually decreasing. When the people who need care, the numbers are increasing. So there's a lot more that has to be done, and it has to be a lot more far-reaching. The money is just the tip of the iceberg from our point of view.
He said today in the Commons that this will see the integration of the health service with social care. Do you think, from what you've seen so far, it will even make a start on that? Well,
that's very interesting. To be fair, the articles I've read said that the first port of call is the NHS, which is great. They've done a massive job through the pandemic, and their need is huge. But social care is always seen as a second cousin. And in the headlines, you see social care, but then it talks about healthcare. They're very, very different. And social care is so important to support healthcare, and actually can alleviate the cost in healthcare. And that perhaps isn't recognised enough in all of this.
Do you think that the money that has been announced, once it eventually gets to social care, because it will at first, as you say, be used for the NHS, do you think it will begin to improve standards across the industry? Not every family is happy with all the care that some of their loved ones receive.
Well, firstly, you've got to be sure that the money, when it goes to local government, goes to the increase in rates, which is what everyone's talking about for social carers. But, we pay well above the national minimum wage. In fact, probably above the living wage in some cases as well. And that's not the issue. It's about the disruption to life. It's about the stress in the industry. It's a lot more than just the pence per hour. And it's also the way social care is paid. Social care is paid generally on visit times, not on complete route or shift times. So, but that would be a huge impact on cost. And to square that circle is really very tricky.
OK, Anne-Marie Perry, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your thoughts and reaction on what has been announced in the last hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
And for more information about how the changes could affect you and your family, head to our website. That's itv.com/news. Migrants are once again taking to dinghies, risking the dangerous crossing over the English Channel. The current spell of fair weather has prompted near record numbers to attempt the journey. Today at dawn, ITV News filmed small boats packed with people. Some said they were refugees escaping Afghanistan. Our reporter Neil Connery was out on the Dover Strait this morning. Neil, what can you tell us about what you saw at dawn?
Well, we were out just after 5 a.m. and in those first few hours, 18 boats carrying migrants were reported in the Channel area that we were in. Now, those boats varied in size. Some of them were carrying up to 30 people or more on board. Others much smaller crafts. Now, in the middle of the channel, we saw some inflatables carrying 4 men with paddles and no life jackets. Now, I spoke to one group there that we saw, and this is what they had to say.
If you have some dream, you can do anything. Just for your dream.
You think the dream is worth this?
Yeah. That's why
Well, these are very distressing scenes to witness, and you get a sense as well of the challenge that UK Border Force face here. Now, it's understood that they picked up around 740 migrants yesterday. That final figure yet to be confirmed. The Home Office say this unacceptable rise in dangerous crossings is being driven by criminal groups. We're determined to target criminals at every level. So far, we've secured 300 arrests, 65 convictions and prevented 10,000 migrant attempts. Now, we've also been speaking this morning to the Kent Refugee Action Network, and they say that more needs to be done to prevent more fatalities happening.
It is inevitable that unless we give people better options, there are going to be deaths in the Channel. We're going to see more children, like the Kurdish toddler who died. We're going to see more children die, and I think we can all agree that none of us want to see that happen.
And in terms of... Well, it's a very complex problem for both the UK and the French governments. On the one hand, you have the demand from those who are desperate, and also the supply of these crossings from criminal groups who are all too willing to exploit that demand.
Neil Connery, thank you very much. Thank you. The mother of a 25-year-old woman who lay undiscovered in a crash car for days has said she has justice after police admitted their failings. John Yule and Lamara Bell's vehicle came off the M9 near Stirling in 2015. But Police Scotland took 3 days to respond to a call about the incident, and the young mother died 4 days later. STV reporter Gordon Corrie is outside Edinburgh High Court. Gordon, we heard today that police failed to log that call properly.
Yeah, one of the stated aims of Police Scotland is to keep people safe, and they certainly failed to do it on this occasion. A call actually came in within a few hours of the crash from a motorist who'd seen the car off the road. But the officer who took that call wrote it down in a notebook and crucially failed to log it on the computer system, so no one was dispatched. And it was only when another call came in 3 days later that emergency crews were sent to the scene. They found that the driver, John Yule, was dead and that Lamara Bell was seriously injured. Although she was conscious and talking, her condition deteriorated and she died a few days later. Well, the police have now accepted that their actions materially contributed to that death. We've had a statement just in the last few minutes from Lamara's mother, which says it's taken a long time for this conviction to be secured, but it is a huge relief that the police have finally admitted to being at fault for Lamara's death. Finally, we can say Lamara has justice. Well, the court has adjourned at the moment, but this afternoon the judge will return to the bench where he will sentence the force. That will be a fine.
Gordon Corrie, thank you very much. Thank you. Still to come, we hear from Emma Raducanu's former coach on what next with the newest star of British tennis.
You say it was almost when, not if, she was going to break through. It's probably a little bit earlier than we kind of expected, but yeah, the tennis has always been there.
But first, Downing Street has said there are no plans for a lockdown or a so-called firebreak around the October half-term if there's a new surge in COVID cases. The Prime Minister's official spokesman said this lunchtime these kind of measures would only be introduced as a last resort to prevent unsustainable pressure on our NHS. And he went on to say the vaccination programme we're now in is in a much different phase. So what might happen to the number of COVID cases now all schools are back across the UK? I'm joined by the GP, Dr. Sarah Jarvis. Good afternoon. Look, schools are pretty much operating in an old normal way now. Do you think we will see a spike in infections?
I do think it's quite likely. In Scotland, that's exactly what happened. And of course, Scottish schools went back in about the middle of August. It's not just a question of children who are in schools. It's gatherings at the school gates, which again were very much not happening in the early stages when schools went back. There were staggered entries and exits. That's all changed. There are children travelling on public transport and all their parents are back at work. So a couple of weeks ago, about 1 in 3 cases in Scotland was children of school age. And we know the Delta variant is much more infectious for children as well as for adults.
Given this focus on children of school age, when do you think we'll get a final decision, an actual decision on whether children will be offered a COVID jab?
It's a really good question. Now, the JCVI has said that the benefits of the vaccine, including to 12 to 15-year-olds, outweigh the risks, but they don't feel that that benefit is great enough for what is quite a big process of inviting all 12 to 15-year-olds in. So they've specifically said to the government, can you ask the chief medical officers if they want to take it into account? We know the risks of the vaccine to young people, and hundreds of thousands have had it abroad, are tiny. The tiny risk of myocarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle, usually a mild side effect, and much, much higher risk if you catch COVID. We have rolled it out to vulnerable 12 to 15-year-olds, but I would hope that to give some certainty, because a lot of parents, I think, are really still hoping for it for their children, particularly parents of children with asthma. I would like to see a final decision sooner rather than later.
And what's the latest on booster jabs for the most vulnerable in society, some of whom had their first vaccine back in December or in January of this year?
Absolutely, and of course the reason they had it then was because they were the most vulnerable, and what's more, the very earliest people to get the vaccine, the very most vulnerable, had their second one 4 weeks, not 12 weeks later, so they may have had their second vaccine 9 months ago. There's also, of course, all the people in the vaccine trials who very altruistically put themselves forward, and in some cases it's 11 months since they had the vaccine. Now at the moment we're still hearing that we've had a third dose added to the primary dose for the most immunosuppressed, 400,000 or 500,000 people who've got, say, blood cancers, recent transplants, advanced HIV. But we are still being told from the JCVI as things stand that, quote, in September, it'll be rolled out first to over 75s and everyone who was told to shield, along with frontline health and social care workers, and then after that to over 50s.
We shall have to wait and see then, won't we, given we're in September already. Dr. Sarah Jarvis, thank you very much. Thank you. Should a new coal mine be opening in Britain when the government's about to host an international climate change summit? Supporters of the proposed site in Whitehaven in Cumbria say it's needed to support the steel industry, but climate experts say it would undermine the UK's green ambitions just ahead of November's COP26 conference. Today, a public inquiry into the plans began. Hannah Miller is at the site of a former mine in Whitehaven for us. This is proving particularly contentious, isn't it, Hannah?
Yes, this is a town that was built on mining, but it might no longer be consigned to history. Just up the road from here, a company called West Cumbria Mining want to dig underground for a specific type of coal that's used in the steel industry. At the moment, it's imported from the US, Australia and Russia. The company say digging here would bring around 500 jobs to the area, but perhaps unsurprisingly, in the context of climate change, it's proving hugely controversial. And as that public inquiry got underway this morning, campaigners gathered outside the proposed site. They say there are better ways of bringing jobs to the area.
We need to make changes to how we produce steel. We need to make changes, big changes to the way that we conduct ourselves, our buildings, the amount of energy we're using. We have to make these steps now. And there are a lot more jobs that we could bring into this area, I am sure.
You don't have to travel very far at all down into Whitehaven to find people who are very much in favour of this. They will also get their chance to have their say over the next 4 weeks during this public inquiry, which will then make recommendations which are delivered to the government, who will have the final decision. This has the potential to be very politically awkward for them. It goes to the heart of some of the biggest questions the country faces: the promise of jobs versus the protection of the climate, their domestic priorities against their international standing.
Hannah Miller, thank you very much. Thank you. Finally, this lunchtime, to the rise of Emma Raducanu. The British tennis team last night beat the American star Shelby Rogers in their 4th round contest at the US Open. It means she's now through to her first Grand Slam quarter-final. Not bad for someone who was collecting her A-level results just 4 weeks ago. Sharon-Preet Kaur serves up the action.
The match of her life, and what a match it was. 2 sets to love against the home favourite Shelby Rogers, taking Emma Raducanu through to the US Open quarter-finals and a win away from becoming British #1. It was a shaky start for 18-year-old Raducanu, her nerves showing as she lost 2 games on unforced errors. Rogers nearly made it 3. But Raducanu regained her cool, winning the next 11 games with flair and composure.
How good is that?
Before victory in just 65 minutes.
I knew it was going to be a tough match. I'm so happy to have managed to come through and overcome some of the nerves at the beginning.
It's Emma Raducanu's first ever overseas Grand Slam. After starting the summer ranked 366th and a Wimbledon newcomer, she ended the tournament prematurely, withdrawing early with breathing difficulties, but captivated the crowds. Matt James coached her in the run-up to Wimbledon and says it's just the start.
She's been balancing both school and tennis, and now the school's finished, she can really look to make those little improvements. Physically, she'll get stronger and she'll still learn a lot, so the learning curve's still going to go up.
Raducanu is soaring. Now she faces Olympic gold medalist Belinda Bencic. Grand Slam glory could be next. Sharon-Preet Kaur, ITV News.
That's it this lunchtime. Mary will be here with the ITV Evening News at 6:30 from everyone here for now. Bye-bye.